Right, well, our part of the country often celebrates having so many young and diverse communities, but with that come some serious challenges too. Take, for example, a Birmingham school serving the needs of children who together speak no fewer than 42 different languages. It also has a higher than average number of children with special needs. The head teacher will be one of 5 heads from deprived areas who'll present a dossier to the Education Secretary Damien Hines tomorrow demanding a better funding deal. Here's our education correspondent, Joanne Riddle.
Greek, Afrikaans, Chinese.
Children at Paget Primary at Erdington in Birmingham speak too many languages to list here.
Somalian, Zulu,
42 different tongues. English is not their first language.
Cantonese.
I want you to all try and use a perfect sentence now.
Sarah Williams runs group sessions to help those who arrive with little English. She's not a linguist, she's a part-time teaching assistant, though with her talent and the schools they become fluent. But staff are grappling to meet not only their needs, but the 28% of children with special needs, not to mention other financial pressures. The school is fighting hard to avoid job cuts.
Personally, it's a worry. Obviously, it's my job. You know, I've got my own family to provide for, but also I worry for the children. You develop quite a strong relationship with the children, working with them day in, day out, and I can't imagine the drop in progress that will be made without all the other things that we can put in place for them here at the moment.
You should be proud. Yeah? Good girl.
A miner's daughter from Mansfield, Vicky Nussey now leads a thriving school in a deprived area. There are more special needs children here than average, and she has vulnerable families who need help too. But she's losing £137,000 from her budget from 2015 to 2020.
Which bits do I stand here as a head teacher and say to my parents and to my children, I can't give you that anymore, or you can't have that level of staffing anymore? That decision of what I'm going to have to cut will be probably one of the toughest decisions that I've ever had to make as a head teacher.
Children who arrive with little English do get extra funding, but Vicky says it's not enough, and many arrive suddenly in the middle of the year, too late for annual funding to be in place.
I can take in any one year an additional 20, 30, 40 children. Many of those don't speak English as their first language, and we have to put in additional support for those throughout the year, and I get no extra funding for that mid-year.
This school is in one of the poorest areas of the country, and the head here has joined forces with 4 others locally and their MP to draw up a dossier of what they say is the impact of school budget cuts. And they're going to present it to the Education Secretary Damien Hines. But the Department for Education says more money is going into schools than ever before.
A survey of Erdington schools found that by 2020, 65% won't be able to afford a teaching assistant in every classroom. 53% won't be able to offer support services for vulnerable families. And 59% said they'll stop residential trips. The Erdington MP, Jack Dromey, who's supporting the head teachers, said the situation was reaching breaking point.
What schools have to do is to give kids, some of them from desperately difficult backgrounds, all the support necessary, and indeed their parents. Now, if you cut back on resources for schools, that damages kids, it damages their parents, and it holds back the next generation.
The Department for Education argues that Birmingham received £910 million for its schools this year, an increase on last year, and primary children who speak little English get an extra £515. A spokesman said our new national funding formula directs money where it's most needed, based on schools and pupils' needs and characteristics, not accidents of geography or history. 18 years ago, 80% of children here were from white British backgrounds. Now it's 44%. Romanian families we spoke to value the school's support.
I'm really concerned about this school because it had an impact, a personal impact on our lives, and we've seen how Alessia was treated in this school. And she was really welcomed in this school.
At first it was a bit, I felt a bit nervous, but then as I was getting more I got more used to it, and I started speaking with a lot more of my classmates, and it ended up being really nice.
Tomorrow, Vicky and 4 other head teachers will meet the Education Secretary face to face to demand better funding for their children.
Joanne Riddle reporting. And we're also joined here today by Rob Kelsall, the National Secretary of the National Association of Head Teachers. The government does appear to be taking this very seriously when you bear in mind over £100 for every primary school child with English as a second language, and actually it's £1,400 for every secondary school child. So you can't really criticise the government for not getting the message of what a problem this is.
Well, what we're calling for is some honesty in this debate when it comes to school funding. The Institute for Fiscal Studies have pointed out to government in their report in July that actually if we look at the per pupil funding in all of our schools across England, that since 2010 there has been an 8% cut per pupil funding across the globe. So, you know, what we're saying to government is, you know, when it comes to investing in our children and young people, you need to be honest with the public, you need to be honest with head teachers, because head teachers are saying to us up and down this country that the cuts they're having to make are having such a profound and negative effect upon the children and young people in their care. And indeed, only last week, the head of the UK Statistics Authority had to rebuke Damien Hines, the Secretary of State for Education, for actually misleading the public over the claims that government are now making.
But it seems to me it's not just the question of funding itself, it's actually about this problem that families arrive with children midway through the year and there's no formula really to take account of this churn when the population changes halfway through a year.
Yeah, pupil mobility has been a factor of school life for many, many years, and of course this isn't necessarily a problem about the funding formula itself per se. It's about there is insufficient money in the government system, full stop. So, you know, whether it comes to additional needs and special needs for children, whether it comes to English as a second language, and the variety of different challenges that schools face, it's simply a case that the money isn't coming with those children.
I'm interested, I mean, you don't think it's a matter of reforming the formula itself, you just think it's a matter of putting more money in?
Absolutely, and where you go in this country now, you know, and we see across the West Midlands and we see elsewhere that small rural schools that have no challenges around English as a second language, for example, are equally calling out for a reform of the way that the schools are funded. And it's not, again, about the formula, it's about there is insufficient monies in the system per se.
We've talked there about the language issue, but you often in deprived areas get a sort of complex of things, don't you? There's a domestic violence refuge nearby that school, and there's a whole complex of problems in areas of this sort.
Yes, and we've seen increasingly, again, since the austerity measures came in, that schools have been essentially the last resort for many children and their families, and of course schools have been left to pick up the pieces from the cuts to social care and health, and of course, you know, now the cuts are biting into schools. There is again a sort of snowballing effect and a detrimental impact on those children and their families.
I think the two things that stand out in what Rob's just said there is he thinks there's a problem about basic honesty, and quite clearly he feels the age of austerity, despite what the Prime Minister said in Birmingham a couple of weeks ago, it's not over.
No, but there is more money going into schools, and I think probably the most important thing here is to determine what schools are doing with the money they've got, and we are seeing many, many more children, 1.9 million children, more children in good or outstanding schools now than in 2010. That's up from 66% of children being in a school that's good or outstanding to 86%. I think that's a tribute to the great work that the head teachers and teachers across the country are doing.
Head teachers and teachers are working their socks off, and it's the only reason that we're seeing decent standard in our school. But the Office for National Statistics has also criticised the government for using those figures because they're taking failing schools off the radar altogether to get to those figures that have just been used. Look, we do need honesty in this debate. The truth is, the government should start listening to head teachers. Head teachers are saying they're having to lay off teaching assistants, in some cases teachers. We're seeing an increase in class sizes. They're having to, in some cases, take away things like breakfast clubs. If you're a poor child, a breakfast club is a real lifeline for you. If you go to school hungry, you're not going to learn very well. So these are the sorts of things that we need to be thinking about.
I mean, the head there at Paget has said that £137,000 has been cut from her budget between 2015
They're not making
and
this stuff up, you know.
But the money's going in, and we are spending more per pupil.
No, you're not.
Allow me to finish. Than children in France, Germany and Japan.
Why are they considering cutting teachers'
So the money is going in.
But these are figures that include private school tuition fees and undergraduate tuition fees, because the schools minister recently got in trouble because he said that we were spending more money than all these other countries. But hold on, he was including money that's spent on universities and money that is forked out by parents to spend on private schools. So let's be honest about the figures here.
And getting more children into better schools, and that's what it's all about.
The question as clear as I possibly can. The government, and you've done it today, trot out big numbers, big statistics. But if you go to a school like Paget, the clear evidence is there that the money is being squeezed and teachers' assistants' posts are being threatened and other squeezes are really bearing down hard on that school.
One of the concerns is that we seem to want to measure success by the amount of money that goes in. What I'm much more interested in is the outcomes for the children, and it's unequivocal that we've got 1.9 million more children in good or outstanding schools than was the case 8 years ago.
Not according to the Office for National Statistics. I mean, they have rebuked you for that claim as well.
Can I turn the question maybe the other way around, Rob, and say maybe is there a way in which the schools can work more efficiently? For example, collaborating more with each other, finding economies of scale, teasing out synergies and efficiencies so that every pound from the government that comes into the school services is better spent?
So two things on that. One is that schools have been very, very efficient with their monies pretty much now, ever since I've been involved with schools. I've been involved with schools for over 21 years now, and schools are very efficient businesses. But of course, the biggest cost in a school is the staff that teach our children and young people, the teaching assistants support the most vulnerable children and young people. And despite the fact that we've got a record level number of children in our schools. Compared to last year, we've seen 5,400 teachers go, 2,800 teaching assistants go. And I'll just end by saying, when 2,000 head teachers march on Downing Street, as they did just 2 weeks ago, from grammar schools, from academies, from maintained schools, I think that should really set alarm bells ringing in Downing Street.
Damien Hinds will see this dossier tomorrow. Should he then be banging on the Chancellor's door, given that the budget's coming soon?
It's entirely right for Rob to be standing up for his head teachers and for them to be asking for more, and for Emma to be asking for more funds. I mean, we are not far away from the budget. I can't predict what will happen in the budget, but one of the pressures on schools, and Rob's acknowledged that, is that teachers have had a more generous pay settlement in the past year than in previous years. So we've got to decide how we want to spend the cake, how we want to spend the money.
The cake is shrinking. That's the whole point.
Okay.
And the government won't acknowledge that, and school children are suffering as a result.
For the moment, thank you, in particular thanks to you, Rob, for being with us here today.
Thank you very much.
You're watching Sunday Politics Midlands. If you've just joined us, welcome. Still to come in today's programme.